Hi, and welcome to the September 2019 edition of City Connection, the live television program with the Mayor of Grand Rapids, Rosalind Bliss. I'm your host, Linda Galash, and you may notice today we're airing an hour earlier than usual, and we're actually going to follow this schedule through the rest of 2019. So again, we come together to offer the community an opportunity to hear about efforts from City Hall and beyond, and we'll also provide opportunity for your questions and comments later in the program. Today we will also be welcoming into the studio Kristin Bennet from Mobile GR. We'll learn about the city's bicycle action plan and how it fits into Grand Rapids strategic plan and the Vital Streets initiative. Your opportunity to take part in the live conversations comes in the second half of the program. You can do that through email. It's cityconnection@grcmc.org. You can send your tweets to @GRTV Access or commenting on GRTV's Facebook page. City Connection is a collaboration with Community Media Center and the City of Grand Rapids, broadcasting live today, September 9th, 2019, here at Community Access Television, Channel 24. We also stream live. We do that at the Rapidian.org, and we're streaming live through Facebook as well, GRTV's page again. All right, Mayor, I want to welcome you to the fall. It's September, and dodging a holiday, we're doing this a little bit later in the calendar. We're doing it on the second week of the month, but welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
We've got so much to cover. There's a lot happening, and we were just kind of running through the list of things that's been happening. But one of the bigger things, at least in my mind, is the city's passage of a human rights ordinance, and I wanted to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, so you're right, it's been a busy summer, and the human rights ordinance was just passed at our last city commission meeting, but we have been working on that actually probably since the beginning of the year. Started work last year with our Community Relations Commission. It went through a number of iterative processes. We had a public hearing on it back in April, got a lot of feedback from the community, asking really good questions and recognizing that we needed to do a bit more work on it. So we went back and made some additional changes, and then we just passed it a couple weeks ago. So we've had a human rights ordinance for a long time, but this was a pretty significant revision and update to the ordinance that includes a whole host of things, from expanding definitions, really clarifying the reporting process, and then the portion of the ordinance that got the most attention was the language that we included related to people calling in concerns into dispatch into 911, and really trying to get ahead of some of the concerns we've heard from the community, where they feel like someone calls 911, they're just having a gathering in a park or a family get together, or something really, which is what we want to happen in the community, and then based on the color of their skin, someone's calling into the police that there's some type of crime or suspicion, and then a number of officers show up. So we wanted to make sure that people, when they have that experience, there's an opportunity for them to report it, and for us really to do a better job as well. So in addition to the ordinance language, we are looking at additional training with our dispatch, but also some awareness and education in the community.
So it sounds like some of that education can even happen at the dispatch level when it is receiving some of those calls. A couple things I noticed in it: expanding definitions of protected classes, bias and retaliation, and familial status. Some interesting aspects of it. I may have my history a little bit wrong, but it seems like Grand Rapids was at the forefront of this a few decades ago as well.
We were one of the first cities to include sexual orientation in our human rights ordinance, and then actually a number of years ago we expanded that, included gender identity. So we have tried to stay at the forefront of that work, and making sure that we are being very mindful of everyone that should be a part of that protected class.
Okay, so it's passed, but it'll take effect as you iron out the details in the next few months then. Yeah,
so we're going to spend the next couple of months doing education and awareness, but then also putting in place a process for reporting, and then also follow-up and enforcement.
Okay. Another education and awareness aspect is a new GRPD policy for interactions with foreign nationals.
Yes, so that wasn't a policy that came through the City Commission, because it's an internal departmental policy. So Chief Payne took the lead on that really short. It had been worked on under interim Chief Kittle, and then when Chief Payne became chief, he finalized that and brought that forward. So It was presented to the public in our Public Safety Committee and went into effect shortly thereafter, but it's much more detailed and very clear and specific about when our department, the police department, should have contact with Homeland Security and particularly ICE.
Okay. Only tangentially different. I wanted to ask a little bit about how the city's handling preparations for the census. You've already kind of put out word that there's workers needed, but there's also the aspect of making sure that, or asking people to not be afraid to respond to the census. What are the efforts there? I know we received contact here about maybe some messages going on our Spanish language program.
Yeah, so the city, since last December, we've been working really actively with a whole host of community partners. So we created a complete count committee. There's subcommittees under that. And we had been doing work over the last several months and really waiting to hear what the Supreme Court decision was about whether a citizenship question was going to be added to the census. We were very glad to see that it is not going to be on the census. So since that time, since we found out, we've been working with the Census Bureau around just that. How do we get messages out about the importance of being counted and why that is so critical for our community? A lot of folks don't realize that there are so many decisions made based on census data, including significant funding decisions. And it's funding for our schools, for our hospitals, for our community health centers, for our community development block grants, for our JAG funding, for home dollars, for Section 8 vouchers for people who really need them to assist with low-income housing. So a lot of decisions are based on census numbers. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that everyone in Grand Rapids is counted, and that for folks who are anxious about it, that we are able to really work with them and support them and help them understand that that it's a confidential survey, and we really are encouraging folks to be counted.
Okay, a lot to be gained by doing that then.
Yeah.
All right, I'm actually ripping through so much because we've got a lot to cover.
I know, it's been busy.
But the other thing is, doing a time-sensitive issue is public hearing tomorrow. And a public hearing tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., and it has to do with the performance and needs of housing and community development programs. So talk a little bit about that. It seems very broad.
Yeah, so a lot. The City of Grand Rapids, we are a fiduciary for millions of dollars of federal funds through community development block grants, through home dollars, and we use those dollars then to support a number of initiatives and organizations. So we have ESG funds, which are emergency grants, and we use some of those funds to assist with folks who are homeless finding not just shelter but housing. So we support, through those grants, we support places like Salvation Army and Community Rebuilders and other nonprofit housing organizations. Home dollars, the same thing. A lot of times we use those dollars to support low-income housing projects with organizations like Dwelling Place and ICCF. Our community development block grants, a lot of that money actually goes to support neighborhood associations to do crime prevention work, community engagement. So at our public hearing tomorrow, we have a plan that we have to submit to the federal government, and so we always ask for feedback on the work that we're doing, the effectiveness of that, and if we should make any changes to those programs.
Okay. And in a week is our City Academy's next installment, and talk a little bit about that. We've covered it before, but it's a great program, great opportunity for new residents.
Yeah, I love this program. In fact, it's a program that we started after I became mayor in partnership with Grand Rapids Public Schools, really wanting to create a space where people could get to know city government, but also how to get engaged. And so you're right, we have another opportunity to participate coming up shortly. You can still sign up for that. And it's this really, it's a wonderful opportunity. You learn about different levels of government. You learn about city services, Grand Rapids Public Schools, county services, how you can get engaged. We talk a lot about boards and commissions, how decisions are made. And the individuals who've gone through the program in the past have really appreciated it. It's for anyone who is new to Grand Rapids. We welcome you to participate.
Okay, and through the city's website, it's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can sign up, and then we try to make sure that we have it in the evening, that we have food available, that we have support for families if they have children. So we try to make sure that there's as few barriers as possible to participate.
Okay. Another one, sort of on the city services level, public safety messaging is available via text and maybe email
Yes.
from Grand Rapids Public Police Department. It's
Yeah.
things like tornadoes, other things like that, maybe
Yeah.
a missing child, who knows?
Yeah.
Tell a little bit about what the new opportunity is.
Yeah, so this was led by our police department, again, to try to make sure that we're connecting with community and communicating well, especially when there's a crisis or when there's an issue in your neighborhood. So you can sign up and get text message alerts from our police department, and you can go and you put in your under text messages, you put 888-777, and then you can put your zip code. And it will send anything that's happening in your neighborhood or that zip code. And then you can also type in Grand Rapids. And then if there's any citywide alerts, you can also get them through there. So it's a new service that we just started. But we're really hoping, again, to provide avenues for folks to hear about what's happening in their community, but also let them know if there is some type of emergency that they should be notified of.
So you signed up for it?
I did. Immediately I signed up.
Okay.
Yep.
What kind of messages have you gotten so far?
I got a thank you message, so thank you for signing up. And you can also go on email if you want to get email updates, but I think text messages are really probably the best and most immediate messages that you'll get.
Okay. I think we've got time to take on one more before we break. So West Michigan Express, that's a pilot project. It's a multi-municipality effort, right?
It is. So this is a really exciting pilot or experiment, as I should say, that we're planning to do with our partners in other communities. So it would be an express bus route, and it'll be different than a BRT. It'll be more of a coach-style bus that has Wi-Fi and a restroom, and the intent is to have a circulator going back and forth from Holland along Chicago Drive into the city of Grand Rapids to help with commutes and really provide another alternative for folks to get to where they need to go. And there would be a number of stops along the way. And so we're partnering with the townships and the cities between Holland and Grand Rapids to come up not with just a route, but obviously wanting them to, during peak times especially, to be able to run every 15 minutes. So the intent is to do a 3-year pilot to really look at utilization and just test out some different things to see if that would be a viable permanent route, whether for a BRT line or some type of cable car. Lots of people are still talking about trains and if that's an option. But the city of Grand Rapids and the Rapid, we've been actively involved in this, along with Hudsonville and Georgetown Township and Holland. But we're really hoping to get it launched next year.
Okay, we'll maybe hear a little bit more of the details when it gets closer.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we'll be with Kristin Bennet of Mobile GR. This is City Connection.
Why do local businesses spend their marketing dollars with Community Media Center? Because it's more than just passive advertising. It is an investment in the community that is eager to invest in you. The Community Media Center makes Grand Rapids vital. We collaborate with local businesses and support events in West Michigan. Inclusive. We amplify local voices that tell the diverse and ever-changing stories of our community. Creative. We encourage artists to showcase and expand their talents and to shape the look and sound of Grand Rapids. Marketing with the CMC will let our community know who you are and increase brand recognition for your business. At the end of the day, we are a resource that will keep you connected to the community. Share your message with diverse audiences by underwriting with WYCE, GRTV, Wealthy Theater, and the Rapidian. Join us in building a stronger community through media. Contact us at marketing@grcmc.org.
Hello and welcome back. I'm glad to have with me Kristin Bennet from our mobile GR department. And Kristin, remind me your title.
I'm a transportation planning and program supervisor, and I work in the traffic safety side of the work group. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we're glad to have Kristin here because you took the lead on a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years, especially the work that we just recently approved at the City Commission table around the Bicycle Action Plan.
Right.
So want to talk about that, but before we jump into that, for folks who are not familiar with you and who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your work experience? I know you come to us from Milwaukee. So why don't you talk a little bit about your work and experience and kind of the scope of your job?
Sure. I actually grew up in Grand Rapids. I was born and raised here, Grand Rapids Public Schools grad. And then after I graduated from Aquinas, went out west to go to grad school. And then I bounced around a few different places. So I've lived in upstate New York, I was in Colorado for a number of years, and then more recently Milwaukee, and then came back home to Grand Rapids about 3 years ago almost. So, and so that was about the time that the city decided to take a different tact with transportation. And so the parking services department has been expanded in terms of its scope. And so we're covering not just parking, so we do still that with parking meters and the garages and the lots and the dash service. But also we handle sort of mobility programs, communications around mobility, trying to work with employers and neighborhoods and business districts on encouraging people and supporting people to get to and from wherever they need to go by many different means of transportation. And then also traffic safety came under our wing last year. And so that handles things like the signs and the signals and the pavement markings, but we work really closely with our engineering staff on all the road designs and all the vital streets projects and the like. So a lot of sort of interdepartmental work to get transportation to happen.
Yeah, so. And you're right, there's been a little bit of a philosophical shift at the city because we are working really hard to make sure that our streets and public spaces from sidewalk to sidewalk, that it's a safe place for everyone. So we want to be more pedestrian friendly. We want to make sure that folks are safe on their bicycles, and then also that that people can get around in their car if they are still relying on their car to get to where they need to go. And then we also have scooters, and we have skateboards, and now there's lots of conversations about scooters, so we can talk about that a little bit later as well. But ultimately, we want to have a holistic view and vision. And I know most people talk to me about parking, and I want to be really clear that that's an important piece of what we provide, but we also want to make sure that people are safe on our streets and on our sidewalks. So that's a big part of what you do.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so some of the work that you've done and that led to this larger planning process for a bicycle action plan. Why don't you talk a little bit about kind of the early iterations of that, why we decided to do it in the first place?
Well, when I first got back here, there was an interest in doing a bike share program. A lot of cities have bike share around North America and throughout the world. And so we partnered with the Downtown Development Authority to do a bike share study. But Commission said, we'd also like you to work on bicycling in general in terms of a bigger plan. Build it off the Vital Streets Plan, which was approved in 2016, but add more detail to it and like where we should be going with bicycling, especially if we were to bring bike share in, so we can support people who use their own personal bikes, but also people who will tap into a system like that of shared bikes. And so at that time we were doing a lot of public engagement, and we took advantage of that between talking about bike share and just biking in general, and got a lot of feedback from thousands of people. We went out to dozens of community events and neighborhood association meetings and business district meetings, and just got a lot of input from people. There's generally a lot of interest in cycling. Bike share was very popular. I think there's still some of those same concerns. Safety is a huge one, regardless of whether someone was riding a bike or wants to, or even driving, having that concern about how to get along together on our streets in a shared environment. And so that led to us working and developing, this is my binder version, the working version, but the first bike plan for the city. And it covers not just the lines on the map, which are really important, because connectivity and getting place to place was something people really talked about, was needing a more connected network, but also all the other things that go with it. Parking is important to people who bike as well, but also things like safety, what kind of information resources and programs might be needed to support things. We talked about bike parking being really critical. And so this plan kind of covers all of those elements in it, and not just those lines on the map. So.
Yeah. And then there's still, and I believe under the addendum, information about bike share. So if people aren't familiar with what bike share is, or if they haven't been to a city that has it, why don't you talk a little bit about what that is, and you know, if you envision that will move forward in our city.
Yeah, so the bike share study is actually part of the appendices. So we incorporated it right in the plan. There is a section in here that talks about still recommending and moving forward with bike share, but we put the full study and all the background material in the appendices of the bike plan, so that's there. Bike share is where there's vehicles that people can check out, usually street side, whether there might be some type of actual station. Sometimes they're just clustered in a kind of bike racks or a painted area where you can park them and pick them up. We worked really hard throughout the country, been working hard to not necessarily need a smartphone to do that, so it's more accessible to a broader range of people, and also not necessarily needing a credit card to have associated. So how do you have cash-based services that people can use who may not be banked? And so right now I'm working on issuing a request for information to vendors of bike share services, and also other what we call micromobility vehicles, which might include like electric assist scooters. There's other things that are being developed out there and being trialed in other cities, to get information about what's available and from whom, and who might be interested in a market of a mid-sized city like Grand Rapids, and how they might envision this being part of our transportation network, because we want it to be synced with our transit system and be something that people can rely on year-round. And then also at that point, after that, we'll take that information and hopefully go to a request we call request for proposals, and then request interested vendors to come in and pitch something to partner with the city on providing that service.
Yeah. So I too anticipate that we'll continue to work through whether we will eventually have bike share. Obviously, there's a financial component to it, and that's included in the analysis. And then since then, I feel like this proliferation of scooters across the country and in many cities has happened. And some cities have really wrestled with that. They've wrestled with safety and having scooters on sidewalks, and having scooters hit pedestrians, or actually Nashville recently had a number of deaths related to cars hitting folks on scooters. So we want to be very thoughtful and mindful. If you go to Lansing, you'll probably see scooters laying all over the place, and that is also a concern, just how, whether you want to kiosk them, put them in a certain location, or allow them to be everywhere. So not that we're opposed to it, but we still have quite a bit of work to do.
Yes.
As we look at the pros and cons and lessons from other cities, and again, cost, and then what is the best solution for our city if we allow, what are they called,
micromobility vehicles is the big capture, but it could be bikes, it could be e-scooters. Those are the two main ones, but we are starting to see some really innovative like scooters that you can sit on as opposed to standing on. I think the challenge with the e-scooters has been that they have been brought in, and they're a very different vehicle than a bike, very tiny wheels, and so whether they're truly roadworthy in many ways for the type of use that they are getting. I think that we're seeing that a lot of the vendors of scooter services are really changing their vehicle and making it much more hardy for that continued use, as opposed to someone who might go buy one personally and just use it for their own use. And it does get used, but it's just at a different pace.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about how we might corral that clutter. And I think that's something that's happening around the country, that I think it just needs to happen. And I think there's something that came out of the bike share study, is that a lot of people talked about the consistency of knowing where they could find these. So the idea of having stops or stations, much like you would find with transit, and maybe even incorporating them next to transit so that people could get off of a rapid or a dash bus and then grab one for that last, what we call last mile, particularly if it's a little bit beyond their walking distance.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think if you haven't been on a scooter, the other thing I think that is concerning that they've experienced in other cities is that they go really fast.
They can.
So they can go very quick. I don't know, up to 20 miles an
They
I
can.
think they can go up to 20 miles an hour. And so that there's safety concerns with that as well.
Although we've talked about the idea of like limiting the speed, which a number of other cities do, to something that's a little more maybe down along the 10 to 12 miles an hour, a little more reasonable speed. And then some of it is having that relationship with a vendor or vendors, that what kind of communications and education will we have? I mean, we have our driving change program with bicycle and motorist education. How can we expand that to include other types of vehicles that are coming out as things change?
Yeah. So we have just about 2 minutes left. So speaking of other types of vehicles, why don't we end by talking a little bit about our experiment with May Mobility. So for folks maybe who aren't familiar with this, or maybe you've seen the little shuttles, the green and white shuttles downtown, why don't you talk a little bit about this?
So we developed a partnership with May Mobility, which is a private company, brought it in, and we're shadowing their autonomous vehicles along our dash route. So actually now the dash routes, instead of having, say, 7 to 8 minute service, you're getting sometimes in the 3 to 5 minute service when the automated or the AV vehicles are going around with it. They are still staffed with a person, but for the most part, they're driving autonomously with that sort of backup while they're still on that trial stage. But a lot of people have gone down to try it out. I have yet, I will say, to go and try it out. I need to go down to do it. But
you should. I did. It's very cool.
And a lot of people are sort of enjoying the experience and sort of getting a chance to try something new like that in Grand Rapids. So.
Well, I think that's a good spot to end. I will encourage you to try the May Mobility autonomous shuttles. When you see them downtown, you can jump on at a dash stop.
Right. And dash is free. Is always free. So, and that runs now nights and weekends as well. So expanded service has really helped with a lot of people, whether they're working later or coming downtown for later events.
Yeah. And the autonomous vehicles are really interesting. I've rode it in the back and in the front, so I can see it all at work. And it's fascinating, and I do think it gives you a glimpse of what the future holds. So with that, I think it's a good place to end, and we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back for Q&A.
Great.
Welcome back to City Connection. Just a great conversation with Mayor Rosalind Bliss and then Kristin Bennet of Mobile GR. We've talked about things such as, what is it, May Mobility, as well as scooters. And we're just chatting right now about scooters. That's a lot of conversation to happen there. Have you seen it done successfely anywhere? Have either of you? And what is the element? What are the elements to a successful scooter system?
Well, I think number one, bike share has been here around a lot longer. So bike share started back. Denver was one of the first cities. Minneapolis. So that one's a lot more mature. And even though there's several different types of models of bike share, whether it's stations with docks, and now there's sort of dockless where you just park them other places, and there's something in between. We're sort of seeing it loop back into being things that are either stations or hubs where they're parked together, especially as they shift to electric assist bikes, which are becoming much more popular and open bicycling up to a much larger audience of people. You have to still pedal the bike, but it provides that support, especially if you hit hills. And Grand Rapids is largely flat, but we've got some real hills in some key areas of town. So. And then scooters kind of came along too, and it followed that sort of dockless model where people just put them in places. And I think what we're seeing now is it's looping back to maybe being more hub-based because these are electric assist. And the need to be able to charge them easily. It's not easy for vendors to run around and pick up all those batteries and swap them out. So can they create stations where you can dock the scooter and the battery can be charged as you're waiting? So this is changing so fast. And so I think, we're hoping to bike share pilot in next summer. And then scooter share, we're going to be asking those questions as we submit that request for information. But I think needing to have a bigger conversation about scooters in the community, which we didn't have yet. And then also just letting that industry continue to change and take advantage of that little bit of time. And then maybe bringing scooters in the next year after that, and kind of really learning from that first year of experience with bike share.
So not a huge desire to be an early adopter on this particular one because there's a lot of wrinkles to iron out yet.
Well, there's a lot of cities that are piloting scooters. Some are doing it pretty well, and I've been tracking and following a lot of them, and they're great. They've been very gracious about sharing a lot on webinars to staff around the country. But it does take a lot of sort of data management and your following, especially if you're using several companies at the same time, because you're trying to get who might be the best company for your community and providing what you need. And so I think that's the thing, is how do you feel out who is the best vendor for what we need as a community, and who's going to really be that partner that we want.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've kind of followed the conversation from the mayor's perspective, and I know that some cities, they have worked with vendors to not allow them after a certain time at night. So after a certain time at night, they're shut off wherever they are, or not allowing them in certain districts, or trying to prevent them. So there have been a couple incidents where people have taken scooters onto expressways or highways, which is very dangerous. So trying to figure out how to prevent that from happening as well, limiting speed, as you said. How do you ensure that, when you get on the scooter, it says, you agree to all of these things, right? Like you won't ride on the sidewalk, and you will wear helmets. And I think when I was in Denver, I didn't see a single person with a helmet, and I saw lots of people on a sidewalk, which is dangerous for the pedestrians. And so there's a lot of conversation around enforcement and how do you enforce. So I agree with you. It's very new technology. It's a very new, service, I should say, that cities are trying to grapple with all over the place.
I do think too, it's an opportunity for us as we did the bike plan. It's having that conversation about how can bike infrastructure be changed to support multiple types of vehicles. So not just going from bicycles to electric assist bikes, but now we have scooters, and can they be served appropriately in bike infrastructure? Probably, but it's one of these things like, are we going to see bike infrastructure even getting bigger because we start seeing more and more people as our system becomes connected? And then what other types of vehicles should we be expecting in the future?
I'm curious about that too. You said it's a category, micro mobility. Yeah. So what are some of the other devices? I think of Segway, but I don't know.
Yeah,
if that's part of it.
Segway would fit into that. Those have been around for, probably 10, 15 years now. And then, and we do have some Segways we see our downtown ambassadors sometimes using them. Sometimes you see them with police or in airports, sometimes being used for security purposes and whatnot. And then we actually have Segway tours someone does here in Grand Rapids. Other micromobility vehicles are scooters that you can actually sit on, as opposed to being the stand on top of. So some cities are starting to see those as testing. And then there's even electric mopeds that are been rolled out in New York City recently. And so it's a lower class of vehicle. And are we going to see that kind of demand to try to share bikes facilities with that? How does that relate to our trail network, which serves a lot of variety of different people? And so having those bigger conversations, and then of course our trail network goes, it's not just within the city, it's this regional network, with lots of different cities and the county park systems and such. So having that shared conversation about how those networks will get used beyond public streets. So.
Is this part of the Vital Streets initiative then, and what else does that encompass?
So the Vital Streets plan, covers the city in terms of how we're making those investment of the income tax dollars that our voters approved, but also this was built on top of that. So that had built an initial network of what we think of as community and commuter routes, and this added a level of more detail to that. We did make some changes, some suggested network changes to the Vital Streets plan, just for better connectivity, maybe a little better density, and trying to take advantage of like better intersections and things. But we're tacking on as many investments from the bike plan into our Vital Street projects. So where we're doing new street projects, whether it's adding in new facilities or tweaking some of the existing facilities and improving them, we're trying to take advantage of all the projects that are out there.
Okay.
And you may have seen, and Kristin can talk about this as well, you may have seen that we have, I would say, upgraded a lot of our painting, particularly when it comes to where cyclists go and at stop signs. So there are some spaces you may start to see that. And then also we have been piloting protected bike lanes. So, we're looking at where those, that's all part of the plan. If you
We actually got a question on that. I think it's related. This is from George, and it says, are there any plans for bike lanes that are physically separated from the road? And that would be the protected lane then.
There you go.
So we have had a bike way for several years, for about 4 years now on Monroe. So north of Guild up to North Park was, instead of just building new bike lanes in the street when we rebuilt Monroe, we built a two-way bikeway off to the west side of the street. And so I was just up there this morning.
At Riverside Park.
Yeah. A lot of people think of it as a trail, but technically it's a two-way, we've called it a two-way bikeway. And so I was up there actually doing some field work on some tweaking, and that's when we do some of the tweaking things there. We built another piece of the first one on Century. So Century has the traditional sort of bike lanes in the street. We had a water project that we jumped onto last year, and we took the bike lanes out of the street and did a two-way bikeway on the east side of Century for probably only 6 or 7 blocks, but the intent is to take it all the way south to Burton. And then eventually try to make a connection there to get into Wyoming, and then also under 131 right to the GR Bike Park is down there. We did some separated bike lanes on North Division last year. I was out today doing a few adjustments and tweaks to get through, and then we're looking for other locations that we want to build out. We have a network in here of about 25 to 30 miles of separated bike lanes. So.
And our hope, if you read through the plan, our hope is to make sure that we have good east-west and north-south connectivity with the protected bike lanes.
Right.
So that, and to get folks off of some of the more busier car-centric, I would say, streets to some of our kind of inner network streets on the grid that are safer, where we can put protected bike lanes.
The bridge over the river right here on Bridge Street, Michigan, is undergoing quite a bit of work for walkability, and it's pretty high curb, at least it was. How is that going to work with the bikes, or are there bike lanes a part of that? How is that access going to work?
Yeah, you want to talk about that? That's been a priority for ours for a couple of years now, so it's nice to see that those pedestrian crossings on each side of the river taking place. But you want to?
Yeah, so those are going right now. So the river walk and the river trail goes through on either side of the bridge. So we're developing 2 crossings. One's near the post office on the east side, and then another one on the other side near the side of the Gerald Ford Museum and the park there. That one's a little bit more interim because there's going to be so much work done with the river restoration that we've put a little bit more interim crossing there because there's going to be just a lot of movement and changes happening there. But the one closer to the post office will have a raised median, so you can cross in 2 stages. There'll be pedestrian ramps, so anyone with disability can cross there. And then there'll be actual flashing pedestrian beacons on the east side, or on the west side crossing. And then we will be looking at Bridge Street between Monroe into, say, like Turner, Mount Vernon, how to address that. We have some very awkward traffic movements, and people are often driving through the left turn lane and some other things. We're going to be really revisiting that too, and how do we make that section work better for everyone.
Okay. Yeah. That is so, every time I drive that, I think this, how did we ever design it like this? It just seems very awkward and not clear. And
well, things have changed a lot, especially with, I grew up on the west side of Grand Rapids, and that has changed a lot since my mom used to own a business down there, and so it is way different. And so really rethinking how that traffic pattern works, and with the new developments that we're seeing and the change in how people travel, there's a lot of people walking and biking and using transit, and of course we now made the Route 19 fare-free, so a lot more people using transit to get along Michigan to Bridge Street and around. So I think a lot of it is just continuously revisiting how we have our streets aligned and laid out. Is just one of those jobs that we do, particularly in traffic safety, but like I said, in coordination with our partners at engineering and public services. So
I'm sure everyone over here is happy to hear that.
yeah, and we're trying to coordinate it with all the closures. So
that's a problem too.
Yeah.
Well, we've got about half a minute. I wonder if there's anything else you wanted to mention that you didn't get a chance to yet. You've revealed a lot of things that are in the works, but what else?
This was on our plan. So yeah, like I said, we actually are doing the first bike counts in partnership with the Bike Coalition. There's a way for people to volunteer. The Bike Coalition did a few years ago. We've kind of expanded that. We're doing 10 locations right now. People were counting this weekend, they're counting this week, and over next weekend at those locations. And we had a good turnout from people volunteering their time. We're hoping to expand that, and then we have interest from people around the region and how to take that sort of model and use it on area trails and stuff outside of the city. So we're hoping to kind of share that and impart that knowledge, and maybe start getting data collected all over Kent County and even outside of Kent County about how our bikeways and our trails are being used. We're also trying to start developing a more consistent way we're doing bike parking. Bike theft was a real big concern for people. We're seeing it kind of ramp up a lot, and especially people who, a bike is a big investment for many people, and so to lose your bike is a real hindrance. You may not be able to afford to replace it. It may be your lifeline to work, and so being able to have consistent bike parking wherever you go is really important. So trying to look at ramping that up and getting it spread more consistently through the city.
Great.
So.
Well, Kristin Bennet, and with Mobile GR, tell us your title again. It was
Transportation Planning and Program Supervisor.
Great. Well, we've learned a lot today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
City Connection will be right back after this break.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
welcome back to City Connection. We're actually now into the Q&A section of the program with Mayor Rosalind Bliss, and we've already got a few things here on the list that we're going to talk about, but we're looking forward to your questions as well. So a few things I wanted to ask you about, and the first one is there's on the ballot for the November 5th election is a millage for the parks here in Grand Rapids. That's something that the City Commission approved last week, I believe it was, maybe a little bit longer than that. Tell us a little bit about what that's, it's parks, pools, recreation areas, and how will that happen?
Thank you for bringing that up. We did, so we had a group of citizens who came forward knowing that our current parks millage sunsets next year, asking us to put a renewal question on the ballot, but with some changes. The request and what's on the ballot on November 5th is a slight increase from 0.98 to 1.25, which comes out to, for an average household, is a difference of about $12 to $13. So historically, over the last 6 years, I'll talk about my property tax bill. I paid about $47 a year for the parks millage, and so it'll be likely closer to $60 a year. And then also how the funds could be used, it will be used to open up our swimming pools in the summer, for some additional capital improvements every year, but then also for better maintenance. So one thing we've heard loud and clear from the community is that we're investing in all these capital improvements, but we want to make sure that the spaces, our park spaces, are better maintained. And then there will be some funding for youth recreation, with an emphasis hopefully on making sure that all children in our city have access to swimming lessons, making sure that kids know how to swim. So that is what you'll find on the November 5th ballot, and which is going to be here in 2 months.
What is the term of that millage should it pass?
So that would be an evergreen. So
Okay.
that would be, there wouldn't be a sunset to it.
Okay, which is a little bit different than what just is expiring and sunsetting. All right, another thing I wanted to ask about, I saw an announcement a city comptroller is resigning or has moved on to a new position. How does that get handled?
Yeah, so you're right, at our last meeting, Sarah Vanderwerf, our current comptroller, announced that she took a job in another community, and so she will be finishing up her tenure with us. Actually, tomorrow will be her last day. So the charter, how that works for filling a vacancy of an elected official is that the City Commission appoints that person. So similar to what we've done for, like when we appointed Commissioner Moody to the 3rd Ward, Commissioner Jones to the 2nd Ward, we'll go through a similar process. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow at our City Commission meeting. I anticipate the timeline and plan will be presented at our next meeting on September 24th. But I anticipate it'll be very similar. We'll open it up for applications. The City Commission will review the candidates. We'll whittle it down to probably the top 3, have some community input before a final decision is made.
How much is left in that term?
So she, I believe 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's partway through.
Okay.
Yeah.
A previous comptroller had indicated she didn't necessarily feel that that was a necessary position. There's a similar position that is not elected within the city, and maybe both weren't necessary. Was there ever any movement on that, or is that sort of
that's a
not
good
really
memory. So it's interesting because since I've been on the City Commission, I was on the commission when Stan Milanowski resigned, and we had to fill that. Then we appointed Donnie Jo DeYoung. Donnie Jo was the one who really tried to make the case to the community that very few cities throughout the country have an elected comptroller because of just how government has changed, and you now have requirements around third-party audits. You have a city treasurer, you have a CFO, you have a deputy comptroller, and that the model is just you don't need an elected comptroller the way that you did 100 and some years ago when that was created. So she tried to make the case to the community. There was actually a question put on the ballot for the elimination of the comptroller, with having a person still serve that role, but it would be a person with the credentials to do it, and then an independent advisory and oversight group. But that failed at the ballot box, so we maintained the elected comptroller, and now we'll go through the process to fill that vacancy again. Okay.
Thanks for refreshing my memory on how that went before. We had mentioned earlier the human rights ordinance that was passed, but in that same meeting there was also a Sept movement.
Yes.
And you have to tell me what all those letters mean.
Yes, so Sept stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design.
Got it.
And it is an ordinance that is specific to certain establishments where we know based on data that there's a higher potential for crime. So we have good crime data that shows us that liquor stores, illicit massage parlors, we've talked about having Sept ordinance for marijuana dispensaries, that we know that there is just a higher likelihood of crime. So what can we do proactively to prevent
You actually
crime?
told us a little bit about this before. It has to do with it. You might think it's good to have all the windows darkened, but it's not a good thing. It's
Right.
better to be able to see in from the street. And that.
Exactly. So in the ordinance, you'll see requirements such as that. So transparency of windows, certain lighting, certain security measures. And then in the Sept ordinance, we also put in language around illicit massage parlors. So we were able to collect some good data around a number of massage parlors in the city where we believe there is continued sex trafficking and illicit activities happening. So the Sept ordinance will also be applicable to those establishments. So we're really hoping to work with the organizations and our police department and the community groups who are working on human trafficking to make sure that we have an ordinance in place to also be proactive for those establishments as well.
Okay. One thing I wanted to bring up, something called the Mayor's Grand River Cleanup happens
Yes.
every year. This is
Yeah.
Mayor's plural because the Grand River covers a lot of cities.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. It's this Saturday, starts at what, 8:30 or so?
Yeah, so I'll be there probably closer to 8, and you're absolutely right. I joined some of my fellow mayors, so the mayor of Walker will be there, and typically the mayor of Wyoming is there, and I think the township supervisor at Plainfield will be there this year, and WEMEAC, West Michigan Environmental Action Council, they organize this. Typically well over 1,000 volunteers come out, and we divide up into groups and we go out and we pick up trash out of the Grand River, and it's a great day. So it starts in the morning. Usually we kick off and are on the buses by 9. We go back to 6th Street Park afterwards. There's lunch there, there's a band playing, there's a beer tent, so a little bit of celebration at the end, but it's a really great day. We pick up hundreds and hundreds of pounds of trash out of the river. I'm astounded every year. I've been doing this, actually did it, volunteered when I was a city commissioner, and then I've been doing it every year since I've been mayor, and it's really remarkable how much trash ends up in our waterways. And a lot of times it's not intentional. You know, we have heavy rains, we have flooding, things get pulled up from that and ends up in our waterways. But if you want to volunteer, coming out, it's a fun day, and you're giving back to the community in a really direct and meaningful way.
All right. Well, one last one, because I know we're down to close to the end of it, and I should have let you end on that one, but I'm going to back up into something that's brand new at the city. It's the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, and have someone sitting in that position right now, Brandon Davis. Tell us a little bit about the role.
Yeah, so thank you. This is actually a good one to end on as well. So, this conversation about adding an Office of Oversight and Accountability actually came from the work that we did with 21st Century Policing. So one of the conversations we had during that process was we were looking at other cities throughout the country, and some cities have this Office of Accountability and Oversight that reports to the city manager and provides oversight to public safety. And so we talked about that last year at the end of the study. During our budget process this year that occurred in April and May, the city manager put in the budget funding for this position, and then really worked through the structure of what that position would look like. And then a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, the city manager named an acting director, Brandon Davis, who had been with the city, so he's been with the city for well over a year in our HR department, has a law background, comes to us from Muskegon. He actually was a prosecutor up in Muskegon, has a lot of good experience. So he'll be working directly with the city manager, but then also with police chief and fire chief, and most importantly, working directly with the community.
Okay. So he's in that position as interim. What's the plan to fill it then?
So I don't want to speak too much for a city manager, but I think the intent is that having Brandon in the acting position as we work through the kinks, and it's a brand new position, really establishing what the structure is, the role, the responsibilities, looking at how that office interacts with community. We're looking at making some changes to our civilian appeals board, so Brandon will assist with that work. And then I believe the city manager will make a permanent decision a little bit later down the road.
Okay, and I think we'll close out today with what's the next City Commission meeting? It's coming up on
Yes.
time for a commission night out, so
Yeah.
give us some of those dates and then we'll close.
Yeah, so we actually have a city commission meeting tomorrow. So we have a
Okay.
full agenda. A couple things on our agenda we'll be talking about in the morning, an update on the comptroller process. We also will be getting a briefing on recreational marijuana, which we know the state will start taking applications for that in November. So stay tuned for more information about that.
We'll follow up on that at our next meeting, including also the recreational marijuana, but not only that, the marijuana in proximity to, what is it, City Park. So
Yeah.
we'll catch up on that next month.
Yes, it's a marijuana. I'm learning a lot about the marijuana industry.
All right.
So we'll happy to talk about that some more. And then, so tomorrow's a full day at City Hall, and then our meeting after that is on September 24th. So those are our 2 meetings in the month of September.
All right, and then when is the next commission night
Yeah,
out?
that's a good question.
I think somebody in this room might know.
Thank
That
you.
is the
I knew it was
September
coming up.
24th one?
I know it's not tomorrow, but yeah, so in just a
Great.
couple weeks.
All right, great. Well, just to remind you, as we close out City Connection, that we are moving to the 4 o'clock hour for the rest of this calendar year. City Connection live first Monday of the month, and it'll be 4 o'clock through the rest of the year. With Mayor Rosalind Bliss, I'm Linda Galash, and this is City Connection on GRTV's Live Wire Channel 24.